So, generosity. Make room for generosity. I don't really have any advice in this situation, but I got a couple stories on why I try to approach things the way I do when I can. When I was a musician, I'm still a musician. I just argued that that's not a relevant sentence like multiple videos ago. When I was doing music professionally, one of the main incomes for artists at a certain level, really at all levels, is merch income. And often when you're small and you're touring in a van or a car and you're doing a 1 or 2 person tour and playing acoustic shows and things like that, merch can be the difference between a profitable tour and a non-profitable tour. And I was kind of a nerd in the music touring world. When I started doing my own tours by myself, I started keeping like P&L statements so that I could figure out whether it was more profitable to do a 2-weekend, 10-day tour or a 3-weekend, like 17-day tour. And it actually turns out that doing a 10-day tour was like 30% more profitable than doing a 17-day tour. And I just mean straight up at the bottom line, because you add so many more expenses when you add a whole other potentially down week. And I knew things like that, but it was hard to get people to buy merch, and selling merch is really weird because as soon as you start creating merch, you enter the retail world, and then people's opinions about the style of shirt or the color of hat start to matter and not whether or not they like your music. Like, they like your music, they'll buy your albums, but they may not like the hat design that you came up with. And as a musician, that's kind of a tough role. So shirts are the worst. You never order the right t-shirt sizes, never. You order what you think is gonna be the right t-shirt sizes, and you always end up stuck with like 40 smalls or something like that no one wants to buy. Anyway, around this time, I was introduced to Joe Pug as an artist, and he's still one of my favorite songwriters and just a world-class, astounding musician. And a great podcast too, by the way, where he interviews other songwriters. And at that time, he was kind of new. And he had this thing where if you went on his website and requested his album, he would mail it to you for free. And it was like a 5-song EP. And somebody showed me his music, and I was blown away. And so I immediately went on his website, and I was like, I'm gonna buy this album. And the first thing on his website was, hey, if you want an album, I'll send it to you for free. And that, I didn't even know what to do with that. I was like, okay, and I ordered one, and it came in. And then I gave it away within like 48 hours. And then I went back on the website and I was like, can I do it multiple times? And so I requested like 15 copies. And I put in the notes, hey, I already did this, but if it's cool. And so when they came in, what they were is he had his own CD burner. This is back in the day. He had a CD-ROM burning kit, and he was hand burning and then with a Sharpie writing Joe Pug, him 101 on the, and then mailing them in these little white sleeves. Like, it was bare bones. That's why you could do it for free, right? And I gave away all of those copies. I probably ended up giving away probably 40 or 50 copies of that album. Around that, also at the same time, I saw a really amazing talk from Amanda Palmer. And these things all sort of changed my framework and on how I viewed people. And, I think Radiohead was the one who did the Pay What You Want for one of their releases, and it just blew up. And so I wonder, because when you're touring, it's really hard to man your booth while also playing the show. So what happens is you set it up, no one buys anything except for the people who sort of know you. Then you play your show, and then you have to book it back to the booth to try to get people to buy merch after cleaning up all your gear, but before everyone's left. And you can't afford, at a certain level, it's like, well, I can't afford to pay someone to man the table. Sometimes you get a local or a fan to be like, hey, I'll give you XYZ if you'll man the table for tonight. And that was fine. But even then, it's money, and people would look at prices, and do I really want to spend 15? So I tested an idea. And what I did was I put suggested prices on all of my merch, and then I put a box, and I put a link to my PayPal address for PayPal income. And I just said, take the merch, pay whatever you think it's worth. Here's the suggested prices, but if you want a shirt, take a shirt. I suggest $20, but if you can only afford 5, then put 5 in the box. No one's gonna check, it's anonymous. And then I also started saying from the stage, look, take an album. They're back there. If you want an album, take an album. If you can pay for it, fine. If you can't, don't care. Just take an album. It's more important to me that you leave with my music than it is that you give me $5 or $10 or $20 for an album. And then I started measuring the results. And the result was that sales more than doubled. I think it was like 68%, almost 70%, double in sales. My profit increased by about 30%. So people paid less for a bunch of things, but way more people were motivated to be like, you know what, screw it. And some people dropped in like 100 and took one CD because I put it in the realm of generosity in their brain, and that changed everything. And I was able to tap into the fact that most people, when given the opportunity, want to be kind and generous. And if you can give that to them, then they will go for it. I encountered this again with the Whiskey Channel, and it's become a fundamental view of how I think you should operate in the world. But first, let's talk about this. This bottle is thanks to Israel Trevino, who I finally tracked down the thing that he requested I drink on the channel, and it was WL Weller 12. I don't know which year this is. I looked up the SKU, and I couldn't get a straight answer from that. There's probably somewhere that will tell you that. I'm not going to, I already looked at this. I'm not going to do it again, but I just did. This is famous. I mean, come on. Who doesn't know that this is Buffalo Trace? This is the famous weeded. Weller is the name of the dude who hired Pappy Van Winkle. And William LaRue Weller was the head distiller. And in theory, he was one of the first, if not the first person to use wheat as a secondary grain in bourbon instead of rye. He hired Julian Van Winkle, who would become known as Pappy. And Pappy started his career working for Weller. This is not Pappy, but this is Buffalo Trace. So, what does it smell like? Bourbon. No, what I love about Weller, and specifically my experience has been the Special Reserve and the Antique or whatever, they're nice, but the 12 has a depth and richness to the nose that sort of just draws you in. It's got a level of complexity that you just kind of want to hover there. And there are other bourbons like that, and often they are cask strength, but Weller achieves it at 90 proof. It's really red, juicy fruit, like like one of those chews, like where you get the red one out of the different colored bag of chews, you know? But there's a dryness behind it. So it's like you've got that red sort of almost cherry, but juicy fruit kind of direction. And then there's this sort of soft, tannic, dry air that brings in this sort of like almost desert heat vibe. It's such a weird thing I'm saying, but it's making sense in my head. And then you'd get that damp wood kind of oak, dry oak, mixed with damp, musty cellar wood. And it crosses back and forth between those two for me in the nose. Sometimes it feels like a really humid cellar. Sometimes it feels like dry earth. But that candy sweetness is like right dead center in the core. It does the exact same thing in the palate, which is it rolls in with this cherry candied sweetness and soft, kind of like honeyed edges. And then as it unrolls across the palate, it goes dry and tannic and a little bit wooden. But never so much that it gets unpleasant, just enough that it tastes like oak. I'm gonna add a little water to this, and I mean just a little, just to see if that pushes anything around. Okay, Whiskey Vault channel. I've got probably 50 stories where I sort of changed my grid to rely on the generosity of people instead of trying to go, I'm gonna get mine, and it worked out magically and extravagantly. This is one other one. We started this channel, we were shooting, Rex and I were in the original vault, and one day, A guy sent us a bottle, and his name was Jeffrey Patrone. And Jeffrey's still out there. I don't know if he's watching this channel anymore, but he was the first person to ever send us a bottle. And we were shocked. And I remember saying on the very first time when we talked about people sending us bottles, and you can go back and see this clip. There's a clip of me saying, look behind us at like these 1,000 bottles of whiskey. Who is going to look at that and be like, you know what these guys need? I'm going to send them free whiskey. There's no way. Man, was I wrong. We, someone else sent the next one, and then someone else sent one, and then we had to start figuring out how to honor these people in a way that just wasn't like, hey, Jeffrey, thanks for the bottle. That felt too small, and so we came up with naming them You Magnificent Bastard. Rex created these like crazy Monty Python style graphics that were like really drama and interesting, and it became the Bastarding, and then people kept sending more bottles, and we had to come up with new levels, and the generosity of the community just overwhelmed any expectation. I mean, I would argue a third to a fourth of the bottles in the vault right now are just strictly from the people who sent into the YouTube channel. And I'm not counting brands. That's absolutely insane and amazing. And I'm so grateful. And it's still such a great journey. I mean, in this bottle, it continues to happen in small ways. And, we sort of removed the fanfare and we asked people to stop sending whiskey. And, now there's no fanfare. There's just Daniel saying, hey, Israel, thank you. I think my point is, well, let me tell you. First, let me see if there's water here. Okay. Adding water sort of opened up that sweet cherry note, made it whiter instead of a kernel, and then brought this kind of like almost grassy note forward. Oh, and it made the palate peppery instead of tannic and dry. Now it's almost like that cherry and cream and the little pepper spike. Oh, and then the aftertaste, very dry. Woo-wee! Like my mouth is dry, but I like it. It's a little bit of mild drama, accessible drama. Cool, all right. That was a nice one. What's my point? I don't know. I've just been thinking a lot lately about generosity and how it's the only way, I think, to view the world in a healthy way. And when I find myself start making decisions out of they always go wrong. But when I make decisions out of hey, I'm letting go, it always goes right. So I think if you give people the opportunity to be generous, it almost always works out. So make of that what you will. Cheers to you. I'm really glad you're here. If you would like to also be generous, then like and subscribe.